not the future, we are the present, and we are ready to take Canada to a new way forward.
No one seems to be familiar, even places I've been before. No one wants to answer, and I come to knock on their door. Someday I may be sorry. Will you know me anymore? When I call to my angel, will she turn the lock on her door?
Where are the perpetrators? Like, maybe this isn't the time and place for them. Where are the the settler society, like in the reconciliation part going forward?
So much of our past relationship with governments has been really diminished by unfulfilled promises. If the apology was going to make a difference to our people, then we had to build robust and sustainable communities. We had to have a healthy, confident, and educated population. And we had to reinvigorate our languages and our traditions.
The Commission also listened to the stories of some of those who worked at or administered the residential schools, individuals who were haunted by their own memories, seeking to come to terms with how destructive the institutions were to Aboriginal people and their culture. Men and women who understood that the schools were destructive to Aboriginal languages and culture and who regret being part of those acts. We heard the pain of those charged with the care of those children. We heard of the demons that they face for not being able to care for them properly or to protect them from the abusers. We acknowledge these individuals too, and we thank them for their contributions.
To be reconciled to another human being requires that I change, and the change demands things of me. It demands of me a commitment to see the other differently, to see myself differently, perhaps most importantly.
It's hard to do. It's hard to open yourself up and be vulnerable to a violent history and a violent present.
I didn't realize that I was still harboring some denial of the extent of the Indian residential school experience.
Honestly, it's kind of hard to grow up in Lethbridge and not be a little biased, which sounds really bad, but that's just the way everyone kind of is.
And then as Christians, what does following Jesus look like as they love their Indigenous neighbors? And many of them come with attitudes that they've adopted and accepted from their families and their communities that are often quite, again, exclusionary to Indigenous peoples.
I mean, a lot of being said was, action without the apologies without actions, they're good for nothing, and I really agree. And church, I think the main function is to love and love our neighbors. And if we don't show love here, I don't know how else we would Yeah.
We from the settler nations do have to just fully believe that and move forward saying, sorry, let's do better. And I think if we're honest, there's still a lot of work to be done on that side of the coin. Both parties have to be involved if this really is going to move forward in an impactful way. And I don't think everyone in settler society is being totally incorporated into the way forward yet. So that's a challenge going forward.
I think brilliant things that the commission did was to bring in honorary witnesses. These are people with influence that are charged with carrying forward the work of reconciliation, but they said over and over, it is the responsibility of each one of us, of each Canadian, to be a witness and to carry this forward.
And I think a huge starting point is correcting people on their bias and telling there's a huge history there that we're missing out on that we don't learn about in school.
The other is just to keep the conversation alive. We're not all of one mind, so all Canadians aren't thinking the same thing on this. But I think to keep the conversation alive and vibrant, I think, is a responsibility that all of us have.
Decides to be an addicted.
There was a strong push in the report to educate better in our public systems. Also a pretty pointed reminder that private institutions, Christian institutions, need to educate their children, their young adults, on what the church's role has been and what the church's role can be. So I think education for myself as a teacher is a huge part of it, to be able to walk students through the history, through understanding of their own kind of connection to that history as Canadians, and then invite them to be part of the next step.
I think when we're imagining the path of reconciliation, there's this tendency to see it as this, we've got to get to this top point, and then we'll be reconciled. And then you have to hold on to it tight so you don't fall off this mountain. But that's not how peace and reconciliation work. It's this journeying together, and sometimes you go off the path, but you can come back onto it. So I don't think it's a perfect path, but I hope to continue to walk that and figure that out with Indigenous Canadians or Indigenous peoples and other Canadians and folks that I meet in Rwanda and Bosnia. How do we walk this path as best as we can? Yeah.
This gathering in here, which is a culmination of your efforts, of so many people that are concerned for our children, for the future.
It's like the eagle for me. On one wing, we have the treaty, and on the other wing, we have the declaration. And in order for reconciliation to fly, it'll take both.
And what if, through these actions, young people could help to carry the weight held by survivors and their families, and use it as power to push for political change? What if this was already happening?